Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for coming. I'd like to call to order this December 19th, 2024 meeting of the Boulder County Board of Review. With that, I'd like to begin with a roll call. Joseph Princeton here, Michael Daly here, Stephen Titus is absent. The first order of business is the approval of the meeting minutes from the November 7th meeting. Open up to the board. Any discussion or comments about those minutes? Any motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second, fair. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Excellent. Okay, so the minutes are approved. So today's meeting is really focused on the one agenda item, the Boulder County Building Code amendments. And with that, I do have a couple of slides to present. Let's see. First thing, I wanted to just bring this to everyone's attention. So one of the items that we are doing is a minor update to our Boulder County wildfire map. So this up on the screen there, you can see the new map. The only changes are twofold. One is that we've always called them Zone 1 and Zone 2. But now we're also adding the phrase West County and East County, just to clarify, makes it really simple for people to understand what's going on. And we did make one adjustment to the map, and that is the section of the county just above and slightly to the east of Lyons. That line used to just go from the highway straight north. It didn't make a lot of sense. It didn't align particularly with parcel boundaries or road boundaries or much of anything particularly useful. So what we've done in this is we've realigned it. It does go a little bit further to the east. It now aligns with the Boulder County Sheriff map that they use when they enact wildfire restrictions. And it makes a lot more sense with when you factor in the topography and vegetation in those areas. So it's a minor adjustment to the map. Other than that, everything else stays the same. So I did want to bring that to your attention.
Just a quick question.
Yeah, please.
Does that line cut through parcels?
I believe this line aligns with roadways, so it shouldn't sit in half in an erratic way that way it used
That
to.
would be confusing.
Yes.
Know how to.
Yeah. So this, and that's part of, I think, why the sheriff came up with that line. It just makes it clear that way. So minor adjustment there. I also wanted to just acknowledge one of the public comments that came to our attention. And we didn't have the time to go through and catch all of these details, but there were a number of places in the code where I think some of them might have been errors in the base code as coming from the ICC. Some of them also were just the result of copy and paste functions where the text got essentially dumbed down and we lost our superscripts and subscripts, and it made some of the math almost nonsensical when you read it just straight as it is. So when this is particular, mostly have to do with energy calculations. So how you get to U values and R values and that kind of thing. And there were a handful of those that this public commenter pointed out to us. So the intention is to go through the code and make sure those things are accurate and make sense. There's also some parentheses that probably could be adjusted to make the math just more logical. We're not inventing any new calculations and any of that stuff. All of those calculations are industry standard calculations for energy flows that we were trying to capture in the code. So we're going to go through between now, hopefully when it gets to the commissioners, and make all those corrections. And I'm sort of considering those to be editorial in nature. I believe that the intent of the content is quite clear, and we just need to make the math work out. So thanks to the folks who pointed that out to us. I appreciate that. let's see. And then there was some slides. So we did have a public meeting. And in that public meeting, I went over some of the details of the energy code. So I thought it might be useful just to go quickly through those, just so you have the benefit of hearing as a board some of those details as well. So these are slides that were captured from that. The first slide here is just talking about new home requirements. So essentially, all new homes will be required to use Energy Star, and as well as a performance standard, the HERS rating or the ERI rating, which are one and the same in this code. And you can see from that chart that's in that screen that as the houses get bigger, the requirements shift a little bit. What you'll notice is that it does put a pretty substantial incentive for all electrified homes. So that means homes that are using electricity, heat pumps specifically for heating of the home and not using combustion appliances. And so that's what the two columns are for. If you don't have any combustion appliances to heat the home, then you just have to hit that HERS score of 50. If in fact you have combustion appliances, then you can see from the table on the right, or the column on the right, that the homes need to get more efficient pretty quickly in keeping with that. And then,
Can I ask a question?
please.
So in a conversation, the way I understood it, because I had concerns about this 100-gallon limit on an emergency generator
Yes.
was being proposed. So you're saying that if you want to stay in the left column, you got to be under 100 gallons right now. But on the right column, you could be in it if you had a 500-gallon.
Yeah, on the right column, you could have a propane heated house. So.
But you could have an all-electric house. But if you have over 100-gallon tank, it puts you in a column.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to hear your input, but I believe after hearing feedback from the community, a 100-gallon tank I believe is too small, and so I think we want to just talk a little bit about that. And maybe this is as good as time as any to talk about that. But I've heard a variety of numbers, but it seems like maybe something in the 250-gallon range might be appropriate. But I wanted to hear your thoughts about that.
No, go ahead. I don't have experience.
What I brought up, and the way I look at it is, an all-electric house is still like probably, I mean, there is wind power, there's solar power, and there's hydropower. But the majority of that electric is produced with fossil fuel today, correct?
Yes.
Somewhere else.
It is, although and part of the motivation for this code being structured like it is that because of the statewide legislation about what's regulating utilities, we're rapidly going to be in a situation where we're above 80% renewable energy to generate power.
So I guess my bottom line thing is that it is called an emergency generator. There's no incentive or financial incentive for someone to try to run their all-electric house on a generator if they're on the grid, because it's going to cost a lot more to buy propane or diesel to run that.
That's correct.
Okay, so it is in fact kind of going to be used in emergency situations. And in the area where I live and do a lot of my work, which is the northwest part of the county, there were people, Excel shut their power off for some of them, and I can tell you the exact address, for up to 7 days, and there was not even fire. So they would need to, and now it's created an outburst in probably people putting in, getting permits for generators. And if they can only have 100 gallons, that was like an average generator that runs a house. If you get the biggest Generac one, which is air cooled, which is pretty common when I talk to other people, what size they have, is a 22 kW. And if it uses 2 gallons of propane an hour, that would last 50 hours. So you're proposing that it could last 5 times that, so 250 hours, so that's 10 days. I think that's better. My question is like, I have a friend, they have a backup generator. Theirs is for medical reasons, for his wife's oxygen concentrator. And I think, what is the benefit of putting a cap on how much there's no incentive to like run your house on this generator. So why is there an incentive to, or why do we need a rule to cap the amount of propane, period? And why it only started at 7,000 feet? Because power was out, I believe, when Excel shut it down last fall from the plains up. And it just seemed like 7,000 doesn't have, I question where that comes from. And I think why put a limit on the propane?
So
That's the two
your
things.
recommendation is to remove both those limits.
And that would be just for an all-electric house,
But
otherwise not using the propane.
it keeps you from like, so the penalty from going from the left column to the right column
Mhm.
is huge. If you have a house above 1,500 feet, it grows, okay?
Of course.
So you're gonna have to like put solar on your house to comply with that HERS rating. Is that correct?
Yeah.
You're basically gonna put more and more solar to get there. And if the emergency generator tank size is the only reason that boots you from an all-electric house into the right column, I don't think you should get booted into the right column.
I think that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
I'm a proponent of all-electric is my, yeah, I understand why the left column's there and the incentives there. I just don't understand why an emergency situation would put you in the right column. And suddenly, you don't just need a bigger tank, you need a bunch of solar on your house just because you want to make sure that your loved one's safe. Or if you don't live here, I mean, there's some of the people don't live here, they just don't want to come home and have to like throw away the refrigerator. That's what you have to do after about a week. You can't get the smell out when things go bad.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Is 100 gallons based on any kind of survey of needs during any of the either fire-related outages or that one that was a wind-related last summer?
That number was not deeply researched. That was the number that was just to get the conversation started. We knew there would be discussion about it, and there has been. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm gonna keep going here. Okay. Any other questions about this piece of it? I guess I should mention that the larger homes are talking about not only meeting the requirements at the table, but also requiring the Zero Energy Ready program. And then there's these embodied carbon requirements, which I believe I mentioned earlier, and those kick in, although we want to delay those. So whenever the adoption date or effective date is, the embodied carbon requirements would happen 1 year from that date to give us time to get some industry education and to get everyone on board, make sure that all our contractors have available to them those materials.
Are you referring to a state mandate there?
Well, the state mandate, some of that is already passed for state buildings, but there's a difference in terms of where you buy concrete for a state building versus just an average homeowner wants to pour a foundation. Okay. So one thing that's in the earlier draft was that little chart. We have removed that and turned it essentially into text. This is part of the accessibility requirements that we're trying to meet with this text. But that also lays out the process for additions greater than 200 square feet of new floor area. And as you can see from this, that as the size of the addition gets larger, the requirements get more stringent. And then the house, the big thing to sort of make a note of is that there is if more than 1,000 square feet of conditioned floor area is added, there is this HERS before PV requirement. So there's a table in the code, and it looks like maybe it's actually less stringent, but the lower numbers could have renewable energy. So this is saying that if you're adding more than 1,000 square feet to a home, you're going to need to make energy efficiency a priority in terms of the design intent and the project scope to make sure that you're hitting that requirement. I will point out that, as always in the code, if there is some unusual situation that restricts the homeowner's ability to achieve these numbers, there is always the possibility of requesting a code modification. And we do grant those from time to time when we find older structures that have unusual construction or site constraints that really make it challenging. This is something that that it already exists within the code. When people can't meet our energy requirements, we look to find ways to get there and see if we can accomplish. Okay, and this is the chart. These are the additional energy efficiency measures. These are optional credits that can be used as the addition gets larger. It's energy efficiency credits that get triggered, and this is just a list of what those are at those points.
Did the more than 500, but less than 1,000? Did it not previously have a different energy credit amount short of going to hers?
So in the old in our old code, we had sort of a different method we had these retrofit measures, and we had a very different menu. This aligns with the code. That those things didn't exist in the code at the time when we adopted ours. So we've modified our whole system to bring us closer to alignment with what the ICC is publishing.
Yeah, maybe I'm confusing it because there's points on commercial buildings as well. It seems like there were different levels there. This one only has one. If you're under 500, you can earn it by points without hers. But at 500 or more, you got to do the hers.
That's correct. Okay,
Can you get back to that just a second? The target figure for 500, the middle one's there. It doesn't have a target.
It's per this chart. Forward to the next slide here.
Oh, okay. It's the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay. Not the previous one.
So this is the chart that's used for additions. It also is for additions and alterations. So this same chart here.
I have a concern.
Sure.
To me, I think this is very burdensome that you add 500 square feet to a 2,000 square foot house. The ideal person wants to just add 500 square feet and they'll do whatever that's in their control. But you'll never get to like 63, I think is the number I see at 2,500 on a log cabin or in the older building that's in the mountains. You're not going to come close. And we did one, and I think the best we could get to, we insulated the roof, we insulated the crawl space. It was a log cabin. And I think we got to like 87. And you worked with us and we traded off the historic designation and we stayed at the 87, but it was quite limited. Like the windows, there's only like so many things in the palette that what you can do. And then the other thing that I struggle with on these is somebody may want square footage, but they're not really going to be. Now we treat it like it's a house occupied year round, but they got electric bills that show for 40 years they never were there in the winter, and yet we got to make them comply for the winter. And I think there's hardships that this puts in. This increases the hardship of trying to get a house to 63. Because that's like in my mind right now, if you follow the prescriptive standards, windows, insulation, furnace, and everything, you can just barely beat 60 on a 2,500 square foot house. Okay, that's under the present code. So it's like, oh, this future house has to remodel 2,000 square feet potentially, almost to be brand new standards, and it seems contrary to, like, people are just going to say, okay, I'm not going to put the addition on, and they're not going to be taking, the addition means people, they use it, they're going to be around more, they're going to care more about the project, because there's a lot of things that are kind of falling apart out in the mountains. And I think it's a disincentive to that. I think the numbers seem high to me.
Target seems low, you mean?
with the numbers low. Yeah, expensive is
Yeah.
what I would say.
Yeah.
In the concept of just adding 500 and clearly if I'm designing, I hit 499, but if you had a 550 square foot addition, can't really figure out, they can't make a decision to make it smaller. It's pretty major.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the top one is wonderful. The 500 and these weighted values that you come up with, I think my hat's off to that idea, because it puts the incentive where the values of the county are as I looked at them. You don't get much for putting in a new efficient furnace, but you got a heat pump in, you get a lot of points. So that does make sense. But this seems like very penalizing. People just will care less about their houses.
I will say that, log cabins in the mountains, do make up a pretty high percentage of the code modification requests for energy issues, because you have essentially a wall without any cavities. And you often want to preserve both the interior and the exterior finish. So those present a particular challenge from an energy perspective. And so this code is designed to push people. And I would say that again, we do work with people when they present a situation like that where they can't get there. And usually what we end up looking at is, what is the existing HERS rating for the house as it stands? How much improvement can be done? But we do recognize that, when you don't have a wall cavity, the house just doesn't perform that well.
Yeah, so something like that would be like a wonderful standard, I think, because I think, like I understood that, like on air infiltration, if you improved it, we had 5 and we have 3, but there's houses out there. I saw a test where it was like 25 in person, and that was like a 4-foot square hole in the wall. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But if they improved a certain percentage, that was an acceptable option. And maybe something like that would be better to say, hey, you do have to improve your house by 25%. By what? I mean, I don't know what percentage. I wouldn't know. That would be a lot more relevant to the different kinds of constructions that are there. Because I don't know if in the area that I live and mainly work, tons of things were built between the 20s and the 50s. And, the air filtration rate is gigantic. But I think we should set up to improve it. But I don't know if the incentive is so hard, they won't do anything. And, it brings me to maybe a separate but kind of related item is you talk about how in our first meeting, you talked about how you looked at other adjacent codes and things. I would bring up that Larimer County has a classification of a building called a cabin. It might be worth looking at this year, but at some point. But a cabin is really made to cover the people that don't live there other than in the summer. And they can't have a furnace. They can only have a fireplace at the maximum for heat source. There's limitations to what they can have, but it is a cabin, and there's a lot of those up there. And we're taking you got to improve your furnace. Well, I don't even have a furnace, right? You got to improve your water heater. Well, I don't have a water heater. There's Forest Service leased cabins that people, I mean, they're regulated by the Forest Service and the lease that they got limited things they can do. It just seems like this cabin thing might be a way to have people care about their facilities and take care of them, but it limits the fact that nobody's going to live there all year round because you literally can't heat a house in a fireplace.
Can I have how many? So I apologize for being late. Big day today, but how many permits of a 500 square foot new house you get a year? How many people would this affect? How many homes would this affect?
Michelle, do you have a sense of that?
So I'm going to ask a little bit, sorry, Michelle Hubner, staff. I'm going to ask a little more question.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things we're talking about an addition here, not a new house.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're asking your question is how many 500 square foot plus or how
Yeah,
many?
how many, somebody comes to you and they triggered this
The
new
middle,
prescription.
the middle bullet you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you have a house, you're wanting to add more than 500 square feet or more. And it suddenly dictates that you have to hit a much higher standard in terms of.
Well, this threshold hasn't existed, so this is a new.
Correct, right. Yeah, that's why we're discussing it. So I'm just trying to understand how many permits coming along. that are
It's a-
500
it's a-
square feet or more.
It's a good question, but we need to do some research and
Me too.
get back to you on it.
Because I mean, if it's 10 people, okay. 10 houses.
No, it's gonna be
It's
significant.
1,000,
Yeah.
well.
Well,
Someplace between those two.
Yeah, I would
Okay,
say
all right,
that.
that's-
I'm gonna
if
get-
it's 100, if it's
I'd probably do 10.
yeah. Well,
Just still, you know,
I think,
Yeah.
I mean, my guess
that
is
fit in that category.
several hundred, but I honestly would need to look in our system and I believe we can get a number for you, but it's,
I mean, it would be interesting to know how many, and then what's the cost to these people of having to bring the entire house up to this, it's big. I mean, then you stick a number on it and then maybe it starts to make more sense as to, do we really need to do this, or is there another way to reach these energy standards
We do-
without,
Yeah.
Move,
mean, we
move
do-
towards it.
yeah.
I mean, we do know that the existing older homes use a disproportionate amount of energy in Boulder County. So
Of course.
this is
Yeah.
the issue that we're trying to address, is that we have a lot of homes in Boulder County, that all the new stuff, all the stuff that's been built since, let's say, 2009, that stuff performs really pretty darn well. All the stuff that's older, there's a lot of that stuff is using way more energy than everyone else. And it's really the worst performers that really use the most energy. And so this is going to be this tension that we're trying to fix,
Yeah.
which is how do you address the energy?
But I mean, I'm with him and just wondering, is there an incremental way of doing it? If if suddenly, like, you got hundreds of people that are now going to be bumped into this very high standard, and it's going to cost 40% more to do this addition and remodel the rest of the house to bring it all up, or 50% more. So suddenly a $250,000 remodel is now a $350,000. And it seems unreasonable to me. Because housing's already expensive and difficult.
In just a game of numbers, it's about a 1,500 square foot house, and I want to put 500 square foot addition on it. I use the rate chart. I have to have a HERS of 66. If I said, oh, no, I'm going to put 1,000 square feet on that house and be at 2,500, I can have a HERS of 70.
Well, the HERS 70 would be before any PV. And so
So you can use
you
PV.
can use
On the
PV
rate chart.
to very quickly move those numbers down. And that's something that commonly happens, is that people put especially on a small structure, a modest sized PV system moves that HERS score pretty quickly, especially if they've added a heat pump equipment. So that's and especially when you add in the rebates and tax incentives and all that stuff, all of a sudden hitting those HERS scores becomes much more affordable.
I don't jump around too much, but the fact that we're now trying to propose to separate the HERS score before PV concerns me. Why do we, all the power over here is still produced with some carbon footprint, right? Without PV. So why would we not be just okay if someone put enough PV to run their entire house and get it to 0, or get it to 50 on the other chart, or get it to any, or get it to whatever number on this chart? Why would we want to penalize them and say you got to do all these improvements to your house before PV, when they can actually produce the power and run their house and get that score?
So it's not about penalizing them. It's
That's
really
the way
about trying to.
I listen to it.
It's really about trying to incentivize the envelope improvements. That's really where the benefit is. So the envelope improvements are lifelong, right? They have a long staying power. They tend to be lower cost, lower carbon, And then the other piece of it is that they have a really important benefit in terms of overall resiliency. So when you have a house that's well insulated and the power goes out, those homes stay steady for much, much longer, and they stay comfortable. They become less of an emergency when the power goes off. Whereas, so there's always an advantage to having a home with a really good building envelope than just overpowering that HERS score with mechanical systems and PV systems. So we always want to try to get that piece first.
Well, I think there's an advantage. I don't always is kind of, I struggle with saying always is a correct word to use. Because if you're taking, I mean, a non-historic old building where there's no, somebody is generations, grandpa built this place, they want to keep it like it is. They can no longer keep it like it is visually. It's no longer, this is crossing the line as we're proposing it today, crossing the line from like 2 codes ago. You could put an addition on a house and the addition just had to comply. Now we had a few things under Build Smart that you had earn points from the list at the bottom of the chart, right? Depending on how big the same kind of additions. Now we're going to, you want an addition, you're going to really modify the heck out of an existing structure. And I wonder why, like maybe 500 to 1,000 couldn't have 12 energy credits instead of HERS rating, as an option. I'm not proposing, I guess I'm proposing to do the similar thing, but I'm saying I'm really confident that HERS rating is going to kill a lot of people ever doing anything on the project. That's what I see.
Well, I mean, the HERS rating has a lot of flexibility built into it. So you can get those HERS points, the same measures you might take that are in that list of energy efficient credits.
That one you can just, but you can buy solar and get it.
Yeah, so you can, there's a lot of flexibility there to look for how to best meet that and what's the most cost effective way to meet that. And that does, in our experience, has been that the HERS rating is what gives the design team and the homeowners the most flexibility in terms of how to achieve these scores. They have a lot of open road in front of them in terms of how they get there.
I'll say maybe it does. I don't know how to do a HERS study, so I got to pay somebody. So I don't really know what all the math is there. I understood the logic of the point system.
Yeah,
And I think it was good, and I think you really improved it on the 500 and less this time.
Michelle?
Sorry, Michelle Hubner, Boulder County staff. I just wanted to let you guys know, and I'm not going to put any backing to this number, but I tried to run a report on the fly. Never a good thing. And my, oh, sorry. Finding. My quick report is saying we have, and again, this is approximate, so I want to dial the number in. And so far in 2024, for additions only, and this wouldn't, Heather and I were just discussing, this might not capture if you're taking a garage and converting it to addition, because that would count. It's my nose. We're talking about 150 permits, the added square footage. Now, I don't know if that's
In 2024?
correct. Now, I don't know if that's 200 or 2,000. I just wanted you guys to get that number. So again,
150 permits were for
150 is just permits, included additions.
included additions.
Yeah.
Of 500 or, well, that's a lot.
And I don't, additions, I don't know how much square footage. It's not telling me how much square footage they added. But and that's again, I will, we'll have it in the notes and get this report out because our system can do it. It's hard to do it on the fly. We're at 3,500-ish permits this year, I believe.
I think that's about right.
Yeah, I looked at it the other day.
3,500, that includes everything from the water heater up to a McMansion house.
Yeah. So if I understand correctly, you'd like to see just a little more flexibility in terms of how those additions, And
believe the
and
president-
maybe a percent improvement might satisfy your thoughts
on hers.
on the HERS.
I think that's very fair.
That sounds better to me as well. I mean,
You gotta do hers twice, but then that's fine.
yeah,
And I think the present system allows you to do hers or earn points, correct? In this 500 to 1,000 range.
Well, the present system doesn't really categorize it the same way, but it does.
I mean, there's a box, you highlight there for 500 to 1,000, and you gotta earn this many points, right? Bill Smart.
There's yeah. And then you had a,
There is a system
Tell
that
Judy more.
does that.
And you gotta do 2 out of 3 things, and you can avoid hers if you get enough points and you put a hood or something, I don't
Yeah,
know.
we
I
don't,
forget.
Michelle, Boulder County staff. So we don't have points. We have retrofit measures.
Yeah.
And so currently you have choices. You're going to follow the prescriptive path and the retrofit measures or do a HERS rating.
Yeah.
That's the current.
Prescriptive and her, and
Up to 3,500 of conditioned floor area. And then you're required to do a HERS today.
so like a choice, like you can do the hers, period, and follow that chart, or you can improve
this is the
her
way the city does it as well.
by some percent.
This is the way,
I don't know what the city
yeah,
is.
this is the way the city,
Introduce yourself.
I believe.
Mr. Dodge, staff, Boulder County. The city does it a little bit differently. One of the concerns with regard to that you may not be aware of is if you're following the retrofit measure pathway, it's prescriptive. And for a lot of existing construction, it's really hard to hit all of the prescriptive measures, including, slab insulation and things like that, because this may be already constructed. So then your only other choice is to go a HERS pathway. And a HERS pathway gives you a lot more flexibility, as Ron indicated. So the HERS rater can increase insulation or fenestration factors in different areas and offset where it's missing. So, and solar is one way to pick it up, but solar is not going to help you if you have a leaky envelope. If you're just flushing that heat out into the open, you're just adding solar and blowing it away. So that's why the emphasis is on the envelope too.
and fortunately, we live in an area that has an abundance of HERS raters, qualified HERS raters around this. In other communities, this has been discussed extensively at the state level for the state energy code board that's being worked on. And one of the concerns that the state had was that there are areas of the state where energy raters are not readily accessible, and you end up having to pay really high fees for, let's say, a second blower door test because there's a lot of travel time. Boulder County does not have that issue. HERS rating is readily available. We have an abundance of them, and that it opens that pathway up to us in a way that's pretty darn useful.
Heather Dodge, Boulder County staff. Again, it could be argued too that it would be more costly to retrofit something prescriptively than to actually get a HERS rating because of that flexibility that the HERS rater has. And the national standards are moving this direction. So that
How about this? The top one and the bottom one have choices. The middle one has no choice. I'm just saying, isn't there a reason there couldn't be some choice to the middle?
There isn't actually a choice in the bottom one. So that's an and. So it has to hit the HERS table and it has to demonstrate.
Oh, that's not a choice.
Yeah, that's not a choice. The idea is to make sure that if we have if you're doing a significant remodel, you're putting in a clear effort to do envelope improvements as part of that. This is just a slideshow. In the text code, that's clear that both things are required. The idea is to make sure that if you're spending enough to put 1,000 square foot addition, that you're making energy a high priority item in that home, in that addition.
I think that's probably going to be the case. Somebody's going to dump
Yeah, it's a different deal.
stick 1,000 square feet onto a house. They're going to do the whole thing. Wouldn't make any sense to not.
And we were trying to exempt this, the smaller projects. So right now, in this, if it's a small addition, then you really don't need to do much. So if it's below that 500 square foot threshold, we're just allowing that to move forward. It's just saying as the project gets bigger, as the house gets bigger, you need to put more and more emphasis on energy. And that is direct instructions from our elected officials that this code must push forward on energy efficiency. That's what they want to see. That's what they've asked me to propose. So, okay, I think I'd like to move on, come back to some of this in discussion later, but I think we want to get through a couple of more slides. There's also some requirements related to alterations, and those are based upon project value. So this is the same metric that we use in the code for other purposes. And basically, this is the same concept that as the project gets more substantial, even if you're not adding square footage, we want you to start to put energy efficiency into the mix. And it's reasonably modest for smaller, so below 50,000, nothing required. As soon as you get to 50,000, there are requirements, and those requirements get bigger as the value of the projects gets larger, until when you're spending $250,000, you're going to need to be making energy a substantial piece of that. So, okay, moving on. A couple of these are just minor corrections, but just in the text of the code that was circulated, we had that chart. We removed that chart, replaced it with text that covered that topic. We also found a misnumbered item that we've corrected. We've added some notes here. That same chart is used in two different places, one for additions, one for significant alterations, just to make that clear. We've also added some information here to clarify that as you're using this information in terms of the cost of the project, that we are going to be looking backwards 24 months. So what we don't want to see happen, which has happened in other communities doing something similar to this, is that people just break up the project into 4 smaller permits and just run through them sequentially to avoid the requirement. We're just saying when you're looking at that total project valuation, it's a 2-year period that you have to be paying attention to. So closing that potential loophole, which has caused problems before.
And this is going to include repairs, not just new. Like if there was a fire in the garage, an attached garage, and it's going to cost more than 50 to stick.
With fires, we often add a fair bit of flexibility of people who are involuntarily thrust into these processes. That's really a different thing than somebody who's doing work voluntarily. So in those situations, much like we do for natural disasters, we try to be as accommodating as we can. So we don't want to, especially when you're dealing with insurance claims and stuff like that. So we do try to work with people to make sure we're finding solutions that are palatable. But these, when you look at when you have a gut remodel because of a fire, there's actually often a lot, not that hard to meet.
I'm thinking worst possible scenario here. For my brain's just going there, but like a foundation repair. So somebody used the wrong foundation, the thing's all destroyed, you need piers everywhere. Yeah. To jack it back up, and there's interior work. Suddenly, you're over $100,000 pretty quickly. Yeah, I see that.
Repairs have their own section in the code. Before they were tied into the alteration table under the retrofits and your pathway, but the national standard and everything outlines it a little bit differently, and repairs don't trigger the same stuff that alterations and additions do, unless your repair is also becoming an alteration or an addition. So if you take that and go further than the full repair as it's defined,
right,
that might trigger aspects of it.
Okay. Makes sense.
Michelle, Boulder County staff, and just a good example that Heather gave. We have a lot of building permits for repair only foundation, exactly like you said. It might be an isolated area, but then we also have we're repairing, we might as well do a big remodel. So we see them both, just as an example for you.
Yeah, I mean, my neighborhood, I live in Ridge of the Hills, just across from the reservoir at Cherryville, and Baseline is renowned for crappy soil. And my neighbor, that same situation, and ended up with having to tear out his entire finished basement and redo the whole thing, and just repairing and returning the interior to where it was $250,000.
Yeah.
So
We
It's their
we're
best.
not, go ahead, yeah.
Heather Dodge, Boulder County staff again. That does occur on occasion, but oftentimes it's because the basement was finished without permits. And it is triggering, and in essence, them to get it permitted for the finish. So
I don't think that was the case in
Yeah.
this
It-
particular thing.
That kind of thing does come up.
it does come up.
Sure it does.
But the goal is always to not penalize people for doing work that is required for health and safety reasons.
Okay.
Right, we want to make sure that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I won't beat that to death anymore, yeah.
It is defined.
Okay, so in the last time we met, we talked about adding embodied carbon requirements for both concrete and steel. And as we looked into this and got some feedback, staff is recommending that we just move forward with concrete. And the reason for that is that the kind of projects that we see in Boulder County tend to be residential. We have very few commercial projects. And the purchasing process for steel for residential construction just doesn't give contractors the market pull to be able to order any kind of steel. They have to kind of take what's available to them. It's different for concrete, but for that reason, it's impractical at this point in time to move forward with low carbon steel. We're just going to recommend moving forward with low carbon concrete.
How many other counties or cities are requiring this sort of thing?
There's a lot of people looking at it. I'm not sure how many have enacted it. The state has enacted it for both steel and concrete and some other materials as well, I believe. But at least I know state it is steel and concrete. So there's a lot of people looking at it,
So when the state enacts it,
but they're
How
doing
is
it
it?
for state buildings.
oh, it's just
So-
state buildings. Okay, okay. So
And in the commercial world, so like the city of Boulder, I believe they're moving forward with something, but they also have a lot more large commercial buildings that are using a substantial amount of steel. The amount of steel that we see, even in a single family home that's using a fair bit of steel, it's really not that much steel as far as the steel industry is concerned.
yeah.
And it's not enough steel to get a special order of any kind. So that's where the disconnect is. That's why we're recommending just moving forward. with
How many concrete suppliers are capable of this? I mean, is this something, I mean, you had mentioned last time that most suppliers are still scratching their head.
This is a national effort. So there's a lot of people working on the steel. There's a lot of people working on Colorado. There's even a lot of people working on it locally. So I'm pretty confident we're going to be able to come up with some that the local concrete batch plants are going to be able to adjust things and meet this. But we do need a little bit of time to make that happen. That's why that 1 year delay. But I think that's going to work. Heather.
Heather Dodge, Boulder County staff. One of the things that's happening too is the Colorado Model Green Code is enacting this specifically. So, and it's not the same way the Boulder County has used the Green Code with limitations on how much development. If you adopt it, it's an overlay and it's on all of your projects. So
So as that rolls out, then that'll also just push the whole industry in this direction. So we're out in front, but not by a lot. We're just a little bit out in front. Yes.
My only thought was, I think that if you read the actual language, maybe I'm ahead of myself again, but incomplete. But you tied it to, it had to be available within an hour.
That was,
Is that in the language?
that wasn't, I know that was something that somebody wrote in proposing, but that's
Or
not.
100 miles, 100
Yeah.
miles.
100 miles is what it talks about.
Yeah, I wrote in the hour.
Okay.
Because I thought there's a delivery time on concrete that 100 miles is a long,
You know,
long ways. to haul it, but an hour might be a little more reasonable.
The goal is to make sure that all of our local batch plants can supply concrete to meet the contractor's needs. It doesn't do us any good if we have a requirement in the code and that people can't actually build a foundation because they can't get the concrete. So again, that's what the 1 year delay is about. And to be perfectly frank, if we discover during that year that the market just isn't able to deliver, we're going to have to make adjustments. We'll come back to you to discuss that. But the intention is that to get, the limited number of local batch plants to be able to deliver this. So if I call them up and say, I need a load of concrete and this is the spec, that they know what I'm talking about and deliver that. If that can't happen, then we'll put homeowners into a bind where they can't meet the code. That's the problem.
And I don't know its relevance, but I have a good friend who lives in Lyons. And he said he thought maybe that the county ought to look at the fact that we have a cement plant in the town or in the county that the county is being very difficult on operating their business, that maybe ought to work with them to create low embodied energy concrete and let them continue to operate.
Yeah.
So that's what I told my brain.
Yeah.
Heather Dodge, Boulder
Sorry.
County staff. Also, I just want to remind you that this is really for those really large homes that have 3,000 square feet of conditioned space or more. So there's not as many that are getting triggered as one might think. It's not every project.
Are we measuring the embodied carbon using the same units as the state is doing, other municipalities?
Yeah, this all comes, all of this language, it comes from the New Buildings Institute, NBI. So they really have developed language that's being used nationally. So that's what we're trying to hook our cart to that same wagon, or to the wagon.
So the industry knows what the targets are.
That's exactly
And have to.
That's exactly right. We really need that. You should all to be singing the same song. So that's what we're trying to do. Okay, and I put this up here, but this is just what's the next steps. We're hoping that everything lines up so we can go in front of the Board of County Commissioners on the 23rd of January. That's really when they're the ones who ultimately have to approve this document. And assuming that they do so, then we're targeting March 31st as the date. So that concludes the canned remarks that I have. And I guess at this point, I'd be interested to hear discussion. I think at some point we need to open up to the public and hear their thoughts. But before we do that, just want to see if there's any further board discussion before we open up and hear what the public has to say. Okay. So with that in mind, we do have a few members of the public, and what we'd like to do is if you do have a desire to speak, if you could click the raise your hand button on the screen, and we ask that you try to keep your comments to about approximately 3 minutes or less, if you could. But I guess at this point, if anyone would like to address the board, please indicate so by raising your hand. Yes, you addressed their concerns.
So, done our job.
Okay, so
Any other pertinent comments that came in through the email process?
Yeah, I read through some of them, but I can't.
I think we tried to address most everything that we received. As I indicated, there still are a few minor editorial corrections that we need to make. But I think other than that, I think we've covered most of that. Everyone should know that there is a second opportunity. So when assuming that the board moves forward with the draft, this will go to a public hearing in front of the Board of County Commissioners. And that is an open public hearing with an opportunity to comment on the text at that time. So everyone will have another crack at the apple. And again, nothing is official until they approve it. I guess, yeah.
So since we were originally going to have two meetings of the nature of today's meeting, you're thinking that we're not going to reschedule this and have two before the hearing?
So it's not necessary, the two meetings isn't a requirement. That ultimately is up to you as the board to decide if you're comfortable moving forward, or if you feel like there's further work that needs to be done and you want to come back and meet again. That is your discretion as the board.
So if we're going to have one meeting, then we would need to come to alignment today. If there were any changes to what's currently.
That's correct. And you could also, if there are minor adjustments that you'd like to see, you could make those requests clear, and you could have a motion that says, you move forward with approval with this modification. So you could make your motion today with that kind of language, if there was something clear and discrete. So for instance, you might want to make a motion that you approve the text, but removing the limitation on the size of the backup propane system. That would be a way to make a motion that would comply. And you could enumerate other things as well, but that would be, if you guys approve a motion, you could have it contingent in that manner.
And then you mentioned the public hearing. Is that going to be the January 23rd? Or will there be another public hearing?
No, that the January, yes, January
Board of
23rd.
Commissioners
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, so we do have a time slot held on their calendar for January 23rd at 9 a.m. That is in the Boulder County hearing room at the historical county courthouse. So that's a meeting. It is both in person, and there will be an online component to that meeting as well. And so that hearing is set up, and and at that time, the commissioners can either approve it or send it back for more work as they see fit.
And it's the email, the code update email for public comments open between now and then.
Yeah, we'll still be accepting and anything that gets submitted to that email address up until I think it's about a week or so before the commissioners' hearing. All of that stuff can be assembled in a packet and sent to the board, so they have it. There will be at some point sort of a cutoff where we put the packet together, but and then anyone who submits a comment after that date, they'll get an auto reply that says, the date's passed, and you'll need to submit these comments directly to the commissioners.
Like by attending the meeting.
By attending the meeting, or I believe that they have a process for submitting comments directly.
Yeah, anything that comes in after we send the packet over to the commissioners, we'll assemble and send over to commissioners as well up until the meeting. So, or they can join the meeting and provide it as well.
Okay, so I guess with that in mind, I'll just ask again, anyone from the public wishing to participate, please raise your hand. And I guess just put it back to the board to see what other discussion or questions, comments you might have at this time.
Well, I submitted these to building code update at bouldercounty.gov,
Yes.
but I don't think they came back my fellow board members didn't see them.
Because you're not a member of the public.
Oh, that's probably.
Yeah. In this case, you're a member of the board.
Okay.
So
I'll go.
the collection of public comments did that.
Didn't you respond?
He responded to some.
We did see them.
Yeah, they all did see it.
Okay.
He was
We
going
did get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
to copy them because otherwise it would create a quorum issue.
Yeah, I do want to have a meeting off out of the public view. So,
So
but if you wanted to address some of those
yeah, let's
questions.
start with R202, which is crawl space definition, which is currently 6'7", 6'8". That's what I think of, but, and would redefine that at 5 foot maximum, correct?
Correct.
What I'd bring up is that there are town sites in the mountains that you're only about 1,500 feet. And there's the rest of the mountains, only about 2,500 is the basic maximum. Kind of your garage, your basement, everything, your walls, just to let you know, it's not a lot of square footage.
Right.
So people want storage, I guess is what I'd say. And they also want to put their furnace and their water heater and their sprinkler tank because nobody's on a city service. You got a big tank and you got pumps. They want to put it in the crawl space so they don't use up their allowable square footage for those things,
Okay.
non-living space, okay? So I think that your concept you brought back, some people have converted these 6'7" and 3/4, I think you used, spaces to living space. And I think that you proposed no stairs down to it, no windows. To me, those two things go a long ways in kind of eliminating living space concerns, okay? But even if you go to 5 feet, and that's what everybody says, I think there ought to be an exception for like mechanical space of like 100 to 150 square feet that could still be 6'7" and 3/4 or whatever, under 6'8", okay? Because an updraft furnace, if you're still gonna put a furnace in, doesn't work well in 5 feet, and that's the best kind of furnace to put in. If you're gonna put in one of these heat pump water heaters, they're not short. They take up a lot of floor space. And a water tank is best if it's tall as well, just for the amount of area it takes up. So it seems like there ought to be at least at a minimum an exception for mechanical space down there. That could be something reasonable if you're going to change it to 5 feet. And then I'll bring it up. It's a burr up my saddle. I'll be honest with it. You guys can tell me I'm crazy, but the building department is forced, I think, by planning department to count the space under the stair that's not 5 feet tall. And I don't think it should be counted if we're going to use 5 feet as a magic number. So stairs get counted in the entire floor, on every floor. And there's a part of it you just can't use and it shouldn't be counted when you have this constrained square foot. That's all. Discuss it.
Heather, you have some.
Heather Dodge, Boulder County staff. One issue you have that becomes a problem code wise around having a stair when you have less than 6'8" is a stair is required to have a landing at the top and the bottom. And that landing has to have at least 6'8" clearance. So if you have a landing at the bottom of the stair for a space that terminates at 5 feet.
Yeah, I'm okay with the stair, Heather. I'm
Okay.
not disagreeing. I apologize, I agree. I'm okay if there's no stairs and there's no windows, okay?
Gotcha.
People just like to store.
Well, and it's been how we've historically looked at crawl spaces without the stair, without the windows anyway. That's not something new. The height is the only part that's new.
Oh, okay,
The height is the only part of that changed.
okay.
And it really is a reaction to some fairly unsafe situations that have come up where people take this space that's really not intended as living space and are using it as living space.
Yeah, my question, like Stephen want to ask the question, how many cases is this? Are we like penalizing hundreds of people for the misbehavior of 2 or 3? That's exactly what bureaucracy has become. For the most part, is this a bureaucratic thing, or is this something that? I mean, I'm not objecting to the 5 feet. I'm not, what's that?
Are there a lot of houses out there with 6'7" crawl space, 6'6" crawl space?
Yeah, I do a lot of.
Michelle,
Boulder County staff, yes, there's a lot of houses that do that 6'7". Mike, back to your point, then they want the stair because how do you get down into there at the 6'7"? So there's a big conflict there that, and
They can go outside. and do that.
I hear you. And the code really reads no internal stair, so you can have an external stair to it, 5 foot or 6'7" today. So we're not denying access. We're trying to limit the height to make it not a usable space.
Yeah, and I, to be clear, I'm not objecting.
Not
to-
usable for living space.
Correct.
Yeah.
But storage would be fine.
I'm not objecting to going from 6'7" to 5, other than some mechanical space, I
And
guess, to be clear. And I think if you're gonna go 5, you gotta not count under the stair on the first floor.
And then I think Mike's point about the mechanical might be, do we get that in note? Yeah, so that could be a good suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, I think, maybe 100 square feet exception to that, where in a place where you want to put mechanical equipment, there's some logic to that.
Yeah.
If you gotta put a sprinkler tank.
Yeah.
And.
I was just thinking about the
Hundred-
heat pump water heaters especially,
Yeah.
they're even a little bit taller than the traditional water heaters.
Heather Dodge, Boulder County staff, one thing that also complicates is, especially if it's a new dwelling or a dwelling that already has a sprinkler system, if they change how they're utilizing that space and add a fuel burning appliance in there, they may have to sprinkle that or add sprinklers or underfloor protection. There's a lot of things that can get triggered when they change how they use it, which can incur more costs that they didn't anticipate. So it's not that they shouldn't be able to do it. It's be aware that there's additional things that may get triggered.
And does the staff look at this when somebody, I mean, I'm thinking worst possible scenario stuff. Somebody's building onto a hillside and a portion of the crawl space is 5 or less, but then there's another portion that as the hill tapers away, maybe there's a section that's bigger. It still could never be living space, but you're all of a sudden have an area where the crawl space may be very tall.
They got filled in.
And I mean, do you fill it in or is there staff looking at this thing going, okay, well,
Shall Huber, Boulder County staff. No, it's the whole thing. They're building
Anywhere.
a large footprint and then a large crawl space underneath, which, kind of gets back to our goals of the embodied energy that, with all of this, that's supposed to be crawl space, not usable. But it is I know Mike is frustrated with square footage limitations and, so it is the idea they can't have the square footage, so they try to use, get it where it's not counted.
yeah.
And it's something staff spends a lot of time on. Managing that crawl space that can't be used. But I appreciate your comments. I think they're helpful.
What are your thoughts about the having 100 square feet except?
Yeah, I don't know what a good number is, Mike, but yes, 100, 200, whatever makes sense for, I like,
I think 150 is,
okay, but
100 is right, and 150 is adequate.
yeah, between the sprinkler tank, any appliances and servicing the
We certainly don't want to do anything that restricts or limits the likelihood of people putting in heat pump water heaters.
right.
Because we do have clear direction that we want to move people in that direction, and they are taller.
I guess my comment back would be, I wanted to add it, I just didn't get to your language.
Heather Dodge, Boulder County staff. I'd also like to say that a lot of those fire sprinkler tanks can be up to 8 feet. 8 square feet. I mean, not feet, but 8 by 8. So, right there, you
Yeah, real
want,
expensive, and it goes through crawl space hole too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But,
The other challenging thing I wanted to bring up with, we're talking about new houses, is it does get challenging to do that radon system and make it work. Because you need to do radon at 5 feet, you need to do radon all the way down. It's just something we need to be cognitive of.
It sounds like 100 feet might be kind of tight.
I wrote down 150. Other comments?
can I interject one thing? Mike, Heather Dodge, Boulder County staff. Mike, you raised the question about log cabins. the previous iteration of the code didn't reference ICC 400. It was developed after the previous adoption, and that's where log cabins get referenced even with their insulation. So it becomes an additional text that you really have to refer to with regard to log cabin construction.
That's mainly new though, right?
It's in this draft of the amendments. I believe it was listed first in the 2018. But it is the reference standard for log cabins.
New and existing. And
Yes,
But it-
yes.
Does it do something like, I don't know, I understand the reference that you're referring to, Heather. Does it like change the HERS rating or something, or what does it?
It gives you a different pathway because yeah, it's not the same thing. And it doesn't mean that you couldn't follow that pathway, but it gives you some exceptions with regard to how you move prescriptively if you're doing an addition. So because you can't meet it prescriptively the same way just by virtue of the type of construction. If you'll look at the code, I believe that's in the very first sections in N11. Yeah, it's N1102.1. It's the exception under that.
Hi, this is Erica Rogers, Assistant County Attorney. I just wanted to jump in because I don't have the meeting notice in front of me, but I believe that the discussion may be moving beyond what was noticed for the public hearing. If someone has that notice and could send it to me, that would be great, but I think we need to make sure we keep the discussion to just any items that were noticed.
Erica, just to be clear, I thought the notice thing was for the discussion of the proposed amendments.
And is this part of that?
This is part of that.
Okay, as long as we're keeping it to that, that sounds great. I just wanted to double check and be absolutely sure. So apologies if I.
Yeah, the citation that Heather just mentioned is in our amendments.
Okay, great.
yeah.
Okay, so this has been noticed and we're sticking to that.
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
Thanks,
perfect.
thanks
Thank
for
you so
keeping us
much.
aligned. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
thank you. Just want to double check. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Other comments? I don't have it.
I skip the 390.3, the definition that does not, basic, the bottom line, doesn't allow for field applied fire resistant coatings.
Correct.
And I believe that, so I'm really bad about quoting these exact numbers, but there's an E something. And if a manufacturer has a product that meets the fire resistant ratings, except for the field applied, and it is permanent, I don't know why we would not accept it.
So there, Heather, go ahead.
So, and this also refers back to what the state is working on. One of the conditions is that it is intended to, it has to be essentially durable. And most of the coatings that have been submitted for review cannot meet the durability standard. They require reapplication typically between 2 and 5 years after the first application. And that alone takes them out. And this is also in the WUI. It's not just in Boulder County's amendments. It's in the WUI, it's in the California Building Code, and it's in the amendments that we've had. It's the durability test and the weathering that the coatings have not been able to be compliant to. They are approved when they're used in an injection process to create fire retardant treated wood. So many of the manufacturers indicate that they are approved, but they're only approved in that manufactured wood process where that's applied to the wood under pressure.
If a manufacturer has data that says it's not needed to be reapplied, it's tested accordingly, and it's accepted in California, and their claim to me is that Boulder is the only place in the country that they are allowed to use it.
So it'll soon be the state of Colorado, because that same language about no field applied material exists in the state wildfire code. And that'll be mandatory statewide. Now that hasn't been passed yet, but that that code specifically talks about factory applied coatings.
And as we've previously referenced in the code where we allowed some things to meet ignition resistance under the CAL FIRE standards, those standards reference the California Building Code 7A. And 7A flat out states field application of coatings is not allowed, does not meet that standard.
Now, I'll add that, we do have alternative means and methods clause built into the code. So if somebody presents a material that clearly meets the same standards as a factory applied product, then I have the ability to approve that product. It just doesn't seem like that product exists. But if it did, somebody could apply for that saying, I'm meeting the same standard, I should be allowed to use it.
Heather Dodge, Boulder County.
Yeah, we're good. We recognize.
I would also like to say that it has been submitted several times. And each time it has been submitted, I know that when I've reviewed a project with it submitted, I've documented why it cannot be approved. So it's not that we don't evaluate it when it's submitted. It's show us that it meets these standards that are listed in the code. And so far, it's been the ones under the durability and weathering that they cannot meet.
I'm going to pause the discussion for a second. The attorney did point out that we didn't formally close the public hearing portion. So with that, I'll just one last time, just make sure that nobody from the public wishes to speak. If we don't see any hands, I'd like to recommend that we formally close the public hearing portion of the discussion and then move to discussion with the board. I think we may have jumped the gun on that, so I just want to make sure there's no the public is waiting. Seeing no hands, I'd like to formally close the public hearing portion and continue with board discussion if we could. So sorry for the interruption. Thanks, Erica.
So we need to make a motion.
No, I just wanted to make sure we were clear which part of the
Okay.
hearing we were in.
Okay.
So we stay aligned with what the rules tell us we should be doing. So again, just to close that topic. So if somebody did propose a material that met all those standards without reapplication being needed, they could apply for alternative means and methods, and that would be something that we could readily accept. It doesn't seem like that's likely.
Factory applied coating do meet the durability requirement.
They can.
They don't have to. So if you should. Yeah, and if you look at the draft of the state wildfire code, they talk about factory applied and they reference a particular standard. That standard is really the gold seal that we're looking for.
Another one at R 390.4.2. This is just really like an understanding. I know that there's concerns in the mountains of having gutters on some people have concerns on gutters. They're not expansive soils. There's usually adequate overhangs. So gutter guards keep pine needles out of the gutters, but they actually enhance the freezing problem of melting snow by kind of shading the ice that builds up in there. And I wanted to make sure that we're still, even with all of that, we're still open to a letter from the design professional requesting exemption
From the
from
gutters.
some gutters and gutter guards based on freezing concerns.
I'll respond to that. That is still in the code. The code indicates that the designer or engineer of record who's essentially designing the foundation can indicate that the water doesn't need to be directed away based on the soil's conditions. So that's where that applies, that then you don't necessarily have to have the gutters, but that needs to be documented by the design professional that because of the current soil conditions, they are not concerned with water being dumped right next to the foundation.
And we do have a small number of projects where that does come through.
Mike, that's 1805.5 is the code section Heather's referring to.
Right. It's in the IRC too.
And that's remaining.
In there.
That's remaining. Correct.
Continuing on, my next one is R 390.4.8.3. My question would be like what Stephen would ask. How many houses have burnt down because the last 5 feet of the railing was combustible?
This occurred quite a bit in the Marshall fire. It was the WIC system, I believe. Kyle is on the line. Kyle, maybe would you like to respond to that?
Yes, Kyle McCaddy, Wildfire Mitigation Specialist Supervisor. Yes, this was indicated in the Marshall Fire report that FEMA did, and it included many recommendations, and as part of that, requiring an ignition-resistant decking, which we currently have, and also railing. And I'll also note that the city of Louisville, their recent WUI code updates also calls out the railing, as does the new statewide proposed WUI code.
So there were documented instances of it being implicated in the ignition process.
But the deck joist can still be combustible.
That's a question. The deck joist can still be combustible, but the railing cannot.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. And
And FEMA's report specifically says that the deck railing caught the house on fire and not the deck. I'm sorry, I'm cursed with common sense. And you got all this you got all this wood and all this mass down there that's combustible, that's attached to the house. And the railing could actually stop 4 inches short of the house. And it's what caused the house to burn.
I can't speak specifically to the exact whether houses caught or not because of the railing, but that's their recommendations in that Marshall Fire report. I think it comes from there was documented cases of fencing causing houses to ignite, and deck railings and fencings are similar constructions and similar vulnerabilities to where those recommendations would be the same.
I guess part of the question is if we're doing it for fencing and railing, to your point, why do we still allow combustible materials in the underside of the deck? Why aren't we covering the underside of the deck with metal or some other, hardy material, non-combustible material to protect it? Is that in the code somewhere that we protect the underside of a deck from combustion?
He's got like a 4 foot less decks here. Got to have 8 inches less grid screen around them. That's one of the proposed changes.
But there is nothing in the code at the moment that requires some sort of non-combustible material to protect
Gravel.
The underside of a deck from fire.
Gravel.
Yeah, there's a couple different.
But
no
Sorry.
combustibility.
That's okay.
Yeah, there's a couple different vulnerabilities specific to decks. One is the underside protection. That's where that protecting heat from getting underneath the deck and igniting the deck from below. And also there are vulnerabilities associated with the joists. That joist to decking connection is a spot where they found that debris and then therefore embers do accumulate there, and that is where a very common part that decking does ignite. And there are recommendations out there to further protect that, like using I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but basically like a metal tape over the top of the joists to protect that further, or using metal joists. And then, but a lot of times with newer decks now, we see those the deck being installed by those spacers, and that kind of reduces the risks of debris and then therefore embers accumulating at those vulnerable spots.
This is just removing ladder fuels, basically. this recommendation, the railings and
Correct, for
Just
the
to move
railings,
back.
yes.
It just is it is a messy design, you know, a wood railing is kind of a pretty typical thing on a deck. And now nobody, well, I guess somebody will probably do it until the last 5 feet and then put metal rail in. But if you're gonna make it all look coherent, you just spend a lot of money changing the deck materials available on an entire deck is what this does.
Correct.
Which I'll make a point of. I think that, like, I said in my email to you, Ron, I think that in our first meeting, we said we wanted to look at cost as one of the factors here. And I think that we should not put that in what we present to the commissioners. Why? I think that we have other goals that just trump the heck out of costs, and this is one of them. And I think I just registered this as one point of why we shouldn't be claiming that we're doing things in the name of costs when we present it to the commissioner. Now, I'm okay presenting it to the commissioners as we're going to do these things. I just don't think we should BS them. It's about, we're thinking about costs. Because I think this is crazy. I think it's like a tiny, tiny little fraction of something. And then I go on to the screening then, Kyle, while you're on there. So putting screening from when a deck's under 4 feet, tell me what the concern is over decks over 4 feet. Is you're putting screening around the perimeter of decks under 4 feet, is that correct, with an 1/8-inch grid or less?
That's correct. Yeah, that's based off of recent research that out of the Institute of Insurance and Business Safety, IBHS, and their recommendations, both with the IBHS Wildfire Prepared, which is a way to kind of help with the insurability problem across the country. They're starting in California, but it's kind of moving across the country. But they're based off of their research, their kind of minimum recommendations include enclosing decks under 4 feet, and that's specifically about reducing the threat of heat underneath decking, and that reduces that risk. I kind of dug into this one a little bit more, just because this is one of the newer kind of standards out there, and there are insurance companies that are also looking at this requirement, and I think there are other ways to kind of mitigate that risk, and their report that talks a little bit more about that specific risk of heat under the decking. They also talk about the risk reduction potential of metal joists is pretty significant. So I think, if we really wanted to kind of look at other ways to kind of mitigate the risk of fire under the deck, that's one potential too.
At one point, the county did require non-combustible joist, and then they backed off quickly. I forget how long ago that was. Does anybody remember? It was in one code revision and it lasted not very long for some reason.
Yeah, that was when we had the 4 Mile fire. It was in that code, Mike, and I can't remember the exact dates. I want to say it was when we had 3 wildfire zones. So it was extreme is what you're talking about, required deck framing. And I apologize, I don't remember which code that.
I mean, we've been learning how houses burn, and we have the emphasis has shifted over the past couple of years, and we realize a lot of what we see in today's code is really about ember resistance, and preventing the buildup of embers, because it's clear that it's not just that hot flame front that's causing houses, but the much more difficult problem to manage is this windborne embers. And so we really have shifted the emphasis to address that issue, because that is what seems to be the harder problem to fight for the fire response folks.
So putting so does the gravel go away on decks under 4 feet if you have the screen?
Correct. Yeah, you would not need to have installed non-combustible surface underneath decks under 4 feet if you're already enclosing that.
And let's just say we have a mountain site and the deck is 4 feet under certain areas and 10 feet at another area, which happens all the time. What's the determination? At 4 feet, you got to have a fence. I mean, a screen, and then after that, no screen.
Right. We did talk about that where, Ron and Heather, y'all could probably talk about this more, but for other purposes of the code, you'd have to stick to that 4 feet or under.
Once it gets taller, then obviously, a ground level fire is a different risk. So it would have closed the low area. It's essential. Yeah.
It is I just give you the logic. I have a screened in porch, but make the screens go up because the screens up there will catch snow in the winter and then catch the wind. You probably don't know, but it blows like crazy in the winter. And it's going to be hard to hold the screens in place. You're going to need like this whole framing system. It's not just a matter of putting screen at 1/8 grid. You're going to have to hold up this whole combustible framing system to hold the screen up, right? So it's not like you just hang a screen down between posts at 8 feet and have it flopping in the breeze at the bottom.
Yeah.
The wind is going to remove it in one winter. So this becomes a whole design problem of what we're trying to implement here. Is what I'm telling you.
Yes, I definitely understand that, and
It'll be solved with combustible materials.
yes, it does allow for non-combustible screening or skirting in that section that would be suitable. There are kind of hardware cloth now that's specifically designed for purposes like this, where it's kind of reinforced, where it's more sturdy. So I definitely get that it's going to be a difficult thing. But again, this is kind of based off of like the current emerging research and insurance companies and what they're looking for and asking people, because the insurability problem is a big problem.
And it's really clear that the risk to the community for having insurance companies withdraw is a huge problem community-wide. And so one of the things that helps that is having a code that really does use the best available information about how we're preventing our houses from burning. That's going to help not just our insurance rating through the ISO system, but also really just trying to make sure that insurance companies don't walk away from insuring the community.
It's actually not that difficult. This is clearly low hanging fruit. The alternative is to make the whole thing non-combustible material, and then it's much more expensive, much more difficult to just find the materials. This one just makes sense to me. Covering the 4 feet, it's just an easy one because the alternative is so difficult.
Is it preventing embers from being blown under there during a fire, or leaves and other combustibles?
It does both. It does both. The windborne debris lands in the same spots that the ember, there's eddy patterns where you have the leaves build up. It's also the same place where the embers build up. So both things.
So let me ask a question. So it's interesting. You bring out, so this is going to sound defensive, I'll probably say. The big fire that's really got you going, Kyle, is in wildfire zone 2. But you're not making this applicable in wildfire zone 2, just wildfire zone 1, right?
It would be applicable to both.
I think it specifically is exempted, right, into the screen.
Question. I don't know.
I thought I saw it.
I can't answer that one.
I made a note of that. Maybe worth looking at. It seems like that it's it seems like the fire down here brought up all kinds of issues that maybe almost don't exist in the mountains, but they exist in a tight clustered housing scenario. But we're still letting them not do tempered glass. We're not doing some of the things that we know work in the mountains. And I don't understand it. When I was at that meeting, whatever months ago that was, that we did talk about cost in not implementing that.
Yeah, I mean, the tempered glass does raise prices for sure. So we try to reserve that for locations that are just. You have.
Heather Dodge, Boulder County staff. That section is not exempt for the plains. It's
Okay.
also enforced in the
It
plains.
is, okay, so.
The only things that are really exempt are the windows. The defensible space is that perimeter versus removing all your trees and whatnot as you're required by your defensible space plan. And the other thing, sorry, I'm trying to go through it in my mind. There's only like 3 instances in the code that are exempt in the plains versus the mountains.
On the HERS rating, 1101.73.2. I've never done a passive home, but I have friends who do them. And they joke about how HERS is not applicable to a passive home. Do we allow them some like off the record option to do a HERS report
So,
in their compliance requirements?
so the passive house homes, and we've done a couple of those now since the Marshall Fire. They're a little bit, the process works really well right up until the very end. And the reason for that is that the passive house final certification takes time, and that's time usually when they're looking for their certificate of occupancy. So if they're willing to wait until we get those final documents from passive house, there's no conflict. If they're trying to get if they're trying to move into their house and get the certificate of occupancy immediately, then that time delay that's needed by the Passive House Institute to do this final certification is an issue, which is why we've had a number of houses that are certifying from Passive House, but also use HERS rating documents to get there. So they do work, and it just there's a little bit of a rub at the very end.
Thanks. On 1102.2.2.2, we kind of like what we threw in Energy Star certified home, DOE, zero energy ready house, Colorado model electric regulation and solar ready, LEED platinum, living building challenge. Are these like, help me understand what is the applicability of these? Are they options?
Yeah, so if somebody.
Or are they required period if you're building?
No, if somebody wants to use Living Building Challenge or USGBC's Green Building Certification Program, those are alternatives that we are formally acknowledging that we can accept as approved alternatives. That said, we have had some Passive House certifications. We have yet to see any Living Building Challenge projects come through the door. We've had a couple of projects that have looked into LEED certification, but because LEED requires HERS as part of it, it ends up being a little bit redundant and people just use the HERS score.
There are options.
Those are available options.
Because the DOE also, and they're going to have the issues of they're certified after construction.
Potentially, yeah, potentially the same way there.
Okay. On this one, can go back to this concept that you got to hit a certain HERS rating without being allowed to use PV. Still bothers me as a pretty quantum leap from where we presently are. I understand what you had said earlier about we really want to improve the envelope, and I understand it on new homes. I struggle like heck with it on existing homes that have additions that are gonna get caught in this crossfire. And I just think that it shouldn't be without allowing PV on existing home additions. Period.
It is, it is the intention to push the bigger houses to make sure they're doing energy retrofits. Because even when a home is using PV, there's still a lot that goes into power that house. So we don't want people to put a really large PV system on a house that has a poor energy performer. We want to make sure that people do energy efficiency upgrades before just adding a renewable energy system.
Let's take that example. So if they got net zero because they got a big field of solar panels, why do we care? It really, I mean, just tell me, we're to the earth, aren't we benefiting the earth the same?
We're not. The amount of energy that's produced. So first of all, you have, a large PV system is expensive, and that large PV system represents a lot of embodied energy in that system. And if we're using it to power a house that's really a poor energy performer, we're still churning through a lot of energy, and it does make it matter society-wide. But it also, the issue is about the house itself. Is it going to be comfortable? Is it going to retain temperature when the power goes out, or is this going to be a liability that you have a really poor performing home that you've just added and overpowered with a large renewable energy system?
There's embodied energy issues with all the things you're gonna have to do to the house to make it comply. There's gonna be embodied energy in those things, right? I have no idea how to weigh them either way.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's an anti-solar approach to doing things to me. And it seems like that you should be pro-solar.
I think we are pro-solar.
I don't think, I would
But
disagree.
again, we're just trying to make sure there's some backstops in the code. Again, trying to adjust those homes that are using energy efficiently. So the other thing is that, so for instance, let's say an existing home that is using combustion appliances, you could be offsetting combustion of natural gas with the renewable energy. And so from a carbon perspective, that's actually still a problem. So it's not, if it's be different if the house was all electric, but if you could have an inefficient home using combustion appliances that gets a low HERS score with a giant PV system. And then you're still having to extract all that gas. We're still having to ship all that gas. We have all that gas, that methane that's leaking out of that system. That's those fugitive emissions are real. Whether it comes, before it even gets to the consumer or even within the home, we're seeing more and more evidence that the fugitive emissions from natural gas piping is a problem. And so again, we want to just try to make sure that the homes are as efficient as possible. We're not using gas and then offsetting the renewable, try to reduce the overall consumption.
I'm trying to differentiate. Like I totally agree with you on new construction, but I differ on things that additions can trigger. That's kind of where I can't really buy it all, because I think that we're just shutting down people improving their houses.
That trigger is for really big houses. So it's really big houses are really significant remodel.
Well, even a simple house, we're telling them they got to meet a HERS rating without PV of 70, right on the 1,000.
Over 1,000.
Over 1,000.
1,500.
So, I mean, it is about remodels also, I guess. And you can use PV and use that chart that we looked at earlier for the middle category.
Yeah, as I said earlier, the goal is to try and make sure that when people are working on their houses, they're incentivizing them to prioritize energy efficiency as part of that project, and not just have it be an afterthought.
And I think we're at risk now of incentivizing them to do nothing. Okay.
Because way to track that, I mean, how can, going forward, if the proposal gets instituted and written, is there a way of gathering data to see if it's doing the right thing or not.
Yeah, the goal's quantifiable. That's a good question.
Yeah. It's
To
hard
do these things
and somebody doesn't do something.
Yeah, right. You just start kind of throwing a dart and hoping it works. I mean, certainly I think it would, but what's the net result?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you know, what I can say is that our sustainability office is they do periodic analyses of how the county uses energy, and looking at, you know, this piece of it, I think would be interesting to see, you know, does the code achieve the goals that we're setting out? Are we actually doing what we're hoping to do? Are we accomplishing what we hope to accomplish? You know, I think those are interesting questions to be looking at.
Or are we gonna end up with remodels of just not being over 1,000 feet to stay out of that category, not have to incur the envelope upgrade of the third category?
Yeah, if we're, yeah, Heather.
It's also worth noting that this is conditioned space that's being added. So it's not prohibiting people from adding their garage with an additional foyer entry or something along those lines, because that small foyer area might be the biggest part of the addition. This is strictly conditioned space measured from the interior at that air barrier. So it's not counting the outer walls.
And a possible garage wouldn't be conditioned or. If
Exactly.
It's not conditioned.
Exactly. So it's not prohibiting them from making, you know, their unheated indoor basketball court. You know what I mean? And so these things, you know, there are going to be instances where somebody wants to make an addition. Doesn't mean that that addition is conditioned space. And that's what this section of the code is talking about.
Any other items for discussion?
it's an interesting question if they're addressing borders that leave stuff all around the houses.
Yeah, the building code regulates the building, not possessions.
Borders, yeah.
Yeah. It does remind me, I don't know if you're aware, you can still put non-combustible, or you can put combustible trim on your house, correct? It faces. But we're gonna worry about 5 feet of railing.
There is an exception under exterior walls for the trim.
I'm just saying, like, you know, do you understand the logic of that?
The trim, when it's
Not that, that's not that most projects do that, but you can put raw wood for trim on your house.
I think
So you can't have a deck railing that'll burn.
I mean, the issue is that with the fence, we see embers and stuff blowing against it, and then it works like this fuse to burn to the house.
Yeah, but a railing's open, you know.
Railings, fence is the same thing. I totally get it. I mean, I've seen how it works and been in fires and watched how these things burn. And railings like that and fences like that definitely create a ladder fuel for the rest of the house. And
That was reported a lot in the Marshall Fire. I see. Kyle.
Yes, I can find this section specifically, but it does allow wood trim, but there's specific risks within 6 inches of a horizontal surface, specifically with the accumulation of debris and then embers in that bottom section of a wall assembly. And so we've specifically called out protecting that bottom 6 inches, which includes protecting trim in that area as well.
I don't know what this applied to. I just made a note, but 1108.5.2 puts the burden on a design professional to write a letter about something. And I wonder, why is the county inspector not inspecting at like wood graded species? Is this related to that? I think this might be related to the concrete. Is that right?
That's correct. That's strictly related to the embodied carbon issue. And it's only triggered for these really large houses that are brand new. So it doesn't it doesn't pertain to every project. It's gonna be fairly rare. And it also has a implementation date that'll be at least a year after.
But this is about who's writing a letter saying it was. Why
So
is the inspector not checking? Like the structural engineer does the foundation, they call it out to meet a certain standard. Is that all that you need?
no,
Or are they gonna
it-
write a letter when it's done that that's what was put in place?
this is similar to the HERS rating, where you're gonna have somebody who is essentially specializing in that concrete embodiment analysis. So it may be that they're getting the reports from the batch plant that says, this is what we sent, this is what it meant. You sign off and say, based on the information, it's sort of like evaluating an engineer technician's reports. You know, so we're just looking for that. You called it out on your plans and you're getting the documentation back from the supplier and whatever to indicate that that's what you got.
Just seems like it's a mixed design is what they're talking about. And that the mixed design should be able to be verified, just like all the other things the field inspector checks.
But the field inspector doesn't check slump. The field inspector doesn't check the strength of the concrete, and those things are also specified. So those are things that, again, we typically would require a third party on if that's specified outside the norm. And this is.
Not that I want you to do more third party stuff, but when you submit a permit, I submit all kinds of specs on things that the field inspector checks. You know, the fire rating of the roof and the siding and the soffits, as simple examples, right? Why is this not like that? Is all I'm saying. It seems like we're passing a new burden onto a design professional, and it should be the field inspector, was my opinion. So,
It really goes back to the standard, and that's the thing. We're not equipped to do that. Much like the HERS rating is based on a ResNet standard, and there is an expert who provides that service.
So if it's in the foundation section and you're also including the strength tests, then that'll be something that third-party inspector will take on as an additional duty, I would think.
It could be
They'll
that
have
way,
to check
yes.
the badge tickets.
Yes.
Document the badge.
And there's language in the code that indicates that it's the engineer of record or an approved agent. And that agent would need to be submitted and approved by the building official prior to hiring him.
Similar sort of stuff's done with sidewalks. You know, I mean, you have a third party inspector that checks the slump, checks the, you know, these going on with that radioactive thing in the back of their car.
Post tension slabs.
Post tension slabs, yes.
Post tension slabs are a little different because you've got the
Still, it's
work being
a-
done afterward
Right.
with.
I guess my point being, it's still a third party thing that's being inspected.
Yes. I mean, as a design engineer myself, if we're putting in a sidewalk, I'm not out there watching the pour. Third party inspector is, and we often see reports with batch tickets that ought to document then the embodied carbon ratings of some sort. And it's why it's important to have it in the same format of units. It's going to demonstrate that it meets the criteria. Yeah. It's going to be another third-party requirement.
Like, another thought again, that is a small segment of the overall permits that we look at, because this is a brand new home that's large.
I understand that. The chart on the points, the N1115, ability to bring that up. Is that all the points you can get on additions?
You got the one that was in my,
It's that chart.
Or the one in the document that has all the
Additional-
footnotes?
It's page
Be better.
In 115.
And
1115.
1115.
Or maybe what I got is a general comment. It seems like it would be good to clarify which ones apply to the whole house or just the addition. or if they are all always applied to the whole house, be really clear about that.
Are you talking about this chart right here?
Yeah, like,
Yeah, I apologize. It's a little hard to
well,
read all that.
it's not those, it's really I think it's, well,
Prior one.
It's those, that's,
it is. So if we look at 10 through 14, for instance. 10 looks like it is, I can't see, space.
Base cooling replacement.
Okay, is that for the whole house?
Yes.
All of these for the whole house?
Well, I mean, some of them are fairly simple. So like an electric vehicle charging
Yeah.
station would just be a discrete item. You know, so,
Right.
so some
But
of
the ones
these are
that-
individual
There's no
items.
partial ones that would not apply to an existing house, though, that are.
Yeah, these are designed to be mostly.
All systemic.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, then on some questions, just like so on the windows, if you do the entire, what is it? The entire house receive the credit? 2.3, is that what, is it? I forget the number, I didn't write the number down.
that one is indicated for the whole house, and we do give them credits if they replace less than the whole house.
And if you do
This is-
one window, you get to 0.27 U value, you get 1 point, right?
You get 2 points if you do some windows, and if you do get 7 points, if you do all windows.
And what and some is like, is there?
At least one.
At least one. Okay. Is this still have the 18% window thing in it? or
It does not.
No.
You got rid of that.
Thank you. Thank you. That was gonna be, where did that number come from?
Yeah.
Okay. On the EV charging.
Mhm.
What are we expecting? Since there's still currently 2 plug systems prevalent out there.
It doesn't matter which one they use.
Can they have none and choose later if they got a way to get it in?
Yeah, isn't this just a 220 outlet and you put your own charger in?
Some of that's driven by the state code too, because the state code with regard to electric vehicle ready requirements and solar ready requirements indicate which charger it has to be. So it's listed in here under Build Smart or the N11, whatever sections, as well as in the sections that were put out by the Colorado Model Energy Code, which is that last section of the code. And I would have to look specifically which one it says, but I think it still gives you options. So
Does it make sense if someone doesn't have an EV to require them to put a plug in, I guess is the question.
So that's where the state code indicates that it has to be ready
Yeah.
to put in. It's
So-
not that you have to have it, but it has to be,
So that's what we're proposing here, isn't it? It needs to be ready. We're not installing a charger.
Yeah,
It-
you
It's
don't have
just
to have the charging
it's just a
device.
220.
You have to have an outlet or conduit.
It's something there.
Wires. You have
So
to
this is just like a bin. It's not stepped up that there's a plug.
That's correct. Yeah, yeah. It just required in more circumstances.
Yes.
And is there a certain amperage that we're defining or anything?
Yeah, it is in there. I forget exactly what it is. It's either. I think it's 40. Yeah. I think it's 40. Yeah, but it was designed to be just a standard level 2 charger.
Level 224.
Yeah, that's right.
Good.
And then again, that's in keeping with what's coming down from the state in terms of EV
Yeah.
requirements.
Yeah, and.
Yeah.
But what the state is requiring, yeah, are we
We're obligated to adopt that
by what? So,
state law.
state law.
It's a minimum.
Yeah.
so.
And
But building
as-
codes, building codes though, don't have to follow what the IBC tells us or IRC tells us. We can exempt things.
we can't exempt this.
We can't exempt this.
Yeah, yeah. So and the trigger is adopting a new code. So any jurisdiction that adopts a building code has to adopt the state codes.
And for all practical purposes, we have put that information besides this big, go look at the state thing is in. our-
We've incorporated it directly into our amendments because that's what people are going to be looking when they want to apply for a permit.
Okay.
Been this way in Denver for a long.
Yeah. Any other discussion?
Question. Yes. You replied something about. Was that email?
There was some questions in the comments about updating snow loads.
Yeah.
And wind loads. And what we're proposing we do is the same thing we did sort of last cycle, which is we address the structural requirements as a separate docket. So we're not discussing the entirety of the building code, but we just look at the wind and snow maps. And we will, when the state is in a process right now, the State Engineers Association is in the process of finalizing their internal review of those updated maps. As soon as those come out, which I think I'm expecting relatively soon, then we'll propose those as to be adopted in Boulder County and have that docket as a separate item, but we won't be dealing with the rest of the code. We can just focus in just on the structural stuff.
And I brought this up to Michelle at the last meeting, and we talked about how we want to be aware of what other counties do. So if on Highway 7, you cross the county line on Highway 7, you go from a 55-pound ground snow load to like 90.
Yeah.
In Larimer County, using some kind of maps. I have no idea where we get ours, where they get theirs, but suddenly one imaginary line on the ground, their snow loads are much higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thus, like personally, I don't even take the ground snow load reductions because it worries me that 55 is not correct.
Yeah, I think it's we're due for an update, and I'm eager to do that as soon as we get the final approval from the State Engineering Association. I mean, again, I think it's the entirety of the building code. This is a big document. There's a lot in here. The structural stuff is fairly narrow in focus, and there's a technical expertise that goes along with making sure we're getting that right. I really want to make sure we have a room that includes many of the engineers that practice in the county. So I think a focused hearing on that subject tends to draw that crowd.
Just the difference.
Yeah, Heather, I see your hand.
Yeah, if we address it that way, it's really only gonna be documented or have to be amended in chapter 16 of the IBC and chapter 3 of the IRC versus all of the books. So it just to give it some perspective.
But that's what we did last time we updated those maps. And those conversations got fairly technical, and that's appropriate for the subject. So we want to make sure we really make sure that all the engineers, or as many of them as we can reach, that are practicing or participating in that conversation, so we actually get numbers that work. It's a part of the code, that's very, very important to get right. And we want to make sure we give it that.
Because they do have the same wind load kind. They don't change, just the snow.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I can't speak to that today.
The one final thing, I guess, is just a question, is does Boulder County ever think about at least exploring what Larimer does with cabins? There's a lot of structures that literally set on a dozen piles of rocks. They've been there for since 1940. My dog can run under them. They don't have a bathroom. They have an outhouse. Somebody's there 2 weeks a year. People aren't going to take care of it because everything that they touch is going to cost them money. Do we ever think about doing something like at least exploring cabins? Seems like one option where they don't have a permanent heat source, et cetera. But is that something that we would ever entertain? Not like for this code revision, but down the road to try to preserve some of these older buildings.
I know there was a substantial discussion about this topic a number of years ago, probably about 15 years ago, something like that. It was talked about, and I think there was a lot of challenges that it brought up. What I can say is we've seen more and more where what had been thought of as seasonal cabins are getting used year round now. We're seeing that for a couple of reasons. One, we're seeing that our winters are a little milder. So areas of the county that have been really impassable during the winter are now suddenly accessible in the winter. And the other thing is that the remote working has really shifted how people think about and use these places. So I'm not opposed to thinking about that again. It's kind of a big topic. It has a lot of implications, not just for how we address it in the building code, but we would also be tied to how we think about those structures in the land use code. So it's kind of a big lift. It's certainly something, I mean, you've mentioned it today. That's part of the record. I think it's interesting to think about what would that mean. But I would say that we did look at that once before, and it turned out to not have any clear, simple, or easy solutions. So thanks for bringing it up, I guess.
But I'd throw in and kind of using some of you use embodied energy and all the logic back at me, some of the things I brought up, but forcing people to act like they're going to live in their house year round, wastes a lot of money and energy in products and stuff. We put a whole new furnace in a house that we can still show you that for 8 months a year, they don't get an electric bill.
Yeah.
And yet we had to put a brand new old furnace in the thing and hit hers 70.
Yeah,
And the only
which
way-
is challenging.
And the only way to get it was to negotiate to go to historic building requirements, which worked out. Just seems like we're forcing people to put stuff in homes that is not needed for the way that they use them. And there are, at least in the mountains, there's a lot of these, like over 50% of the homes probably get used just in a few weeks in the summer.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to actually look at those numbers. Sean.
I guess my not formed comment would be, let's look at what you're talking about, because if it's an existing building and it's not conditioned,
Existing buildings.
and not conditioned, and we're not requesting it to be conditioned, this feels like a different animal. So I guess I'm curious about.
But like they want to now put an indoor bathroom in, right? It can trigger all kinds of stuff if it's over 200, if it's in that even the first tier, right? That's the thing, is that
Gotcha.
the present generation doesn't really want a truck to the outhouse, even in the summer.
No,
And the outhouse is not something the county actually really wants either.
well, so you're talking it's different than talking about an existing building compared to either a small addition or a remodel converting to a different space because you want to condition it. They want that bathroom heated, I'm guessing.
Most of it drain it down, but yeah.
If that's how you're protecting the plumbing by draining it, the code still has an allowance that you don't have to necessarily insulate everything and provide an airtight PERS or otherwise compliant.
So
Plus-
let me bring up, this actually goes much bigger. This goes into the planning department, who then will get transportation involved, and you have to improve the damn road to the house,
Yeah.
So this is the big issue.
Yeah, and that's what I said.
You just add a bathroom.
Yeah.
I think this creates a situation where people just don't get a permit.
Yeah. Well, that can happen.
As I said before, this topic was looked at. We didn't get to any kind of ability to move forward with a code that really addressed this. Perhaps it's worth looking.
But there's a
looking
draft.
again.
I mean, you guys look at all kinds of other drafts about to come up, what you came up with here. I just suggest maybe you look at Larimer County's cabin thing and say, wow, this is ridiculous, or it could make sense. And it does apply just to existing things. It's not like you can go build a cabin.
I see.
Okay.
Well, if you've done all your comments there.
Yeah.
And you don't have any still comments, I think we should refer this on to the Board of Commissioners with a couple of items that I noted, please.
Let me, before you make a motion, I'm going to ask Erica to come on for just a moment. There's been some discussion about what things. I just want to check in with Erica and make sure I understand how we should be moving forward.
Hi, Erica Rogers, Assistant County Attorney. As I've been looking through the materials that were posted, I have some concerns that the amendments may not have been clearly noticed. I see where they were listed under the November 7th meeting. And I think that the safest course forward would be to table the discussion at this point. Don't actually take a vote tonight. And then we can renotice it, make sure the amendments were clearly shown, make sure the public can.
Oh, you got muted. Erica, you muted. Erica,
Oh.
you muted there for a second. Sorry, you were good, and then you muted.
Am I back on? My
You're back,
headphones
yes.
just died.
Yeah.
So then when we reconvene at the next hearing, we wouldn't have to have this discussion all over again, but we could just open it up again for public comment, just to make extra sure that the public was able to review they knew it was being discussed. And then this board would only have to respond to any additional issues raised, and then the vote could be made. Does that make sense, or do you have any questions about that?
Yeah. Okay, so with that in mind, it sounds like there's a couple of edits the board might like to see. So maybe if you could clarify what those are, that would give staff an opportunity to make those revisions and publish a revised draft with the comments that you'd like to see. And then we can come back at the next meeting and maybe just have a brief meeting to review, make sure that the text is modified to your liking, and maybe address any additional public comments that happen.
That sounds great.
All right, thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Ones that I picked up from the discussion, there, like you brought up a lot of good points. One of them was the crawl space and an exception for the additional depth for mechanical. And we talked about 150 square foot. We'd like to see that one was one that we all agreed. And then the tank limitation for backup generators, either eliminate it completely or certainly raise the quantity.
And I'd propose to also eliminate the elevation of 7,000 feet as a criteria.
Okay.
You guys agree?
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that part.
I say
7,000 people, what?
I got the just remove the limitations on backup systems entirely. So
Oh.
remove the size limitation.
Oh, I see, yeah, the elevation, right. Gotcha.
And with backup
Bombs.
And then there were several other things that seemed to be, through the discussion, it seemed to be there was a path in the code to deal with some of these things, or else there were reasons why the nightability issues, the deck screen, that kind of thing were in there. And were there any others that you feel strongly about that you'd like to see modified?
Well, I thought we talked about looking at the 500 to 1,000 square foot HERS and seeing if there was an option, like a percent reduction to the HERS or some other, not like delimiting what you have, but expanding what you had.
So just to make sure, you're talking about
The middle one,
the middle, this category, more than 500 square feet of new condition.
which is also less than 1,000. Because 1,000 goes to the next one.
So you'd like to see an exception here that requires HERS per the target in that figure, or a HERS reduction of a certain amount? Would that satisfy?
If there was a HERS reduction of percentage, that would be like an option for
Okay.
to it.
Sure.
I mean, it could be energy credits, like above too, you know what I mean? Like a bigger number, like you gotta have 7 if you're under 500, you gotta have a dozen if you're over, I don't know, those kind of things. Not saying it has to be the percent, but just something as an option.
Okay. Well, we can work on coming up with some proposal for that. I'd rather not try to write that right here, because something to logistics. I hear your desire for a little bit of relief out there, some alternatives, so I can work on that.
And then I think looking into the cabins is a longer term thing that wouldn't be part of this code, and that we'd like to encourage that.
Okay.
Just
We can make sure that that is relayed to the commissioners' desire to look at that topic. Okay, so I have three items to modify in the code. Where that might also give us an opportunity to clean up some of those minor typographical edits. We can get that cleaned up. I guess one thing I would like to do is make sure we have a date that works for the board. So we make sure we do have a quorum. That's critically important. Staff actually was predicting this as a possible scenario. And so with that in mind, I'm wondering if the afternoon of Wednesday, January 8th works for the board.
Looks good to me.
Would 2 o'clock on that day work?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
Staff have any look good for everybody? I think that works for you. Okay, so we can work on getting that meeting set up.
Brief one, like an hour or something. It's not this.
I would anticipate a shorter meeting because we've covered a lot of ground tonight. So we'll really be just reviewing the revised text for those 3 items. Make sure we give the public full and ample opportunity to speak their mind and new opportunities to respond to any new comments that come in. We'll sort of demarcate from this point tonight forward as a new round of comments. So those will be segregated out. So you'll have a chance to see those separately.
And please send out the whole updated package.
Yeah, we'll have a clean copy of the code that shows. And what I'm thinking we can do for the purposes of clarity is publish a draft that accepts all of the text that was there as of tonight and just red lines changes that have been made. So everything will show up in black text. And then from tonight forward, it'll just show tonight's edits. And that way it'll be clear of what's already been discussed and what's different or changed since tonight. So all the other edits and changes will accept all those in the document. So those will show up as just black text again. And that'll be clear what's proposed to be different, just to keep the versions clear. Does that work for everybody? Okay. Erica, anything else we need to do right now?
Nope, that sounds good to me. Thank you.
With that in mind, I guess I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Chairman can do that.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone in the public. Thanks for all your time. I know it's a difficult and time-consuming process, and I do really appreciate all your efforts to help us and guide us through this. So thank you. Let's stand up.
Short enough.